Welcome to this week's episode of Becoming More Me. I'm your host, Teresa Lear-Levine, EFT master practitioner, hypnotherapist, international best-selling author, and founder of Becoming More Me. And today's conversation is such a beautiful intersection of psychology, money, identity, and nervous system work, which you all know are some of my favorite things to explore. My guest today is Catherine Morgan. She is a multi-award-winning financial coach, former financial advisor, and the host of the global podcast, It's Not About the Money. Her work focuses on helping women heal their relationship with money so they can build real wealth without the shame, anxiety, or self-sabotage. Don't you love that? What I really appreciate about Catherine's perspective is that she doesn't just talk about budgets and spreadsheets. She talks about the emotional and psychological patterns that drive our financial decisions and how our relationship with money is often, I would say always, a mirror for our relationship with ourselves. After navigating her own journey through debt shame cycles and a life-changing health scare with her son, Catherine became deeply interested in the behavioral and emotional side of money. And now she's on a mission to help 1 million women become financially resilient. So today is going to be amazing. We're going to talk about the money and emotion connection, trauma and identity, and how those show up in our financial behavior, and also why knowing what to do with money is not often enough. And we'll get into somatic work, nervous system regulation, and how that can change the way we earn, spend, and receive wealth. So let's get into it. It all starts now. Welcome to the show, Catherine. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Thank you so much. Me too. I feel like we have lots of connections, certainly from chatting to you before we decided to record this today. I feel like we've had lots of shared experiences. So very excited to dive in today.
Absolutely. Lots of synchronicities and commonalities. So I always loved starting with kind of the human story behind the work. I know that you're a powerhouse when it comes to helping people with wealth and everything in your business, but like what originally pulled you into exploring the emotional and the psychological side of money?
Yeah, gosh, it's such a multifaceted question. Because I was a financial advisor since the age of 18. I was actually the youngest female financial advisor in the UK, and
Amazing.
I kind of fell into the profession really. It wasn't a chosen pathway. I was very interested in psychology growing up, but I kind of got to the age where most of us do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be in my career. So I followed my sister's footsteps and entered into financial services, and I stayed there for 20 years, did all the qualifications around financial advice, and I didn't follow any of it. I was literally in the all of my 20s, I was in these patterns of save, 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 spend, spend, spend. And I ended up accumulating £30,000 worth of debts, which you can imagine as a financial advisor, the shame that I was experiencing sitting across the
Probably a
table
little bit
giving
of
advice.
imposterism, and yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And what was interesting is I didn't really recognize it. I didn't recognize it as as a kind of a pattern that was very present for me. I just knew that I was bad with money, and I would internally have these narratives with myself that you're terrible with money, someone's going to find out about you, you're a fraud, like all of these internal messages. But it wasn't really until my second son was born, which was back in 2013, I'd navigated a lot of career insights at that point, and I knew that I didn't want to be in that profession anymore. And I actually ended up training as a personal stylist because my relationship with money was about clothes. Like I would overspend through shopping in an attempt to make me feel better about my lack of confidence with my body. And then navigating motherhood, where my body had was changing and shifting my whole identity, it kind of got to a point where when my second son was born, we almost lost him twice as a baby. He was very poorly at birth, And then he almost died of meningitis at 5 weeks old.
Wow.
And it was in the very moment I was in hospital with him that I was actually exposed to a lot of jargon from the medical profession that I didn't understand. Doctors were saying sepsis to me when he was in hospital, and I was like, I don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
And I remember returning back to work. He got through treatment and is now a very happy 12-year-old boy.
I'm
But he
so
got
glad.
through, thank you. He got through treatment and I went back to work a year later. And I remember sitting in the bank advising this 68-year-old widow who'd never looked at money before, never made decisions for herself around money before. That was always made by her husband for that generation. That was very common. And I remember sitting there thinking, is this why people don't go and get financial advice? Is this why people are stuck with money? Because the financial services sector use so much jargon that shames people, that makes them feel stupid, that makes them feel irresponsible. And I just had this real light bulb moment of that's exactly how I felt when I almost lost my son. And I literally, in that moment, had this huge light bulb moment. I went home to my husband and I said, I'm quitting my job. I can't do this anymore. And I resigned. I threw myself into the world of financial psychology.
Mm.
And that was the pathway that then led me to completely heal and transform my own relationship with money and then go on to help other people to do the same.
That's amazing. I know a lot of people in the States and even in Canada who have been financial advisors who just feel like the system is set up to not really help people succeed financially. I'm not sure. Do you feel the same about the way it's set up in the UK?
100%. Like the financial services industry make a lot of money by using jargon that people don't understand.
Yeah, and I've also been blessed to know a lot of people like yourself who have taken that knowledge and then put a better spin on it, psychological, spiritual, emotional spin, where we can really like you can make so much more out of your wisdom and knowledge in ways that people can actually apply, right? So, what did you start noticing other than like with the widow that you saw about people's behavior with money that made you realize that it wasn't about just financial literacy?
Yeah, I think there's so much information about money out there, especially right now. Like we're living in a society where we've got more information, too much sometimes, that we have to try and navigate. And that leads to a lot of nervous system related patterns that I was observing. So, overwhelm was a huge area for a lot of clients where they had all of this information around them, but they couldn't actually apply it to their personal situation. And I'll give you an example of this. So, I could have like two completely different clients, one who had the same information, and one client would be very impulsive with their relationship with money, would read that information and like do the quickest, fastest thing that they thought was going to create them some better financial habits. And on the other side, I'd have this client who'd have the same financial information, who was so petrified of doing anything, of taking any action around money. And it was really curious to me that, well, how can these two people be given the same information, but yet apply it so differently? And this led me to really understand the deep psychological patterns that sit behind our own relationship with money. And actually, it's less about the stories and the actual beliefs that we carry around money, and more about what do we make money mean and what do we make money mean about ourselves. So
Absolutely.
this one client over here, for example, who's very impulsive might be thinking, well, I don't deserve to have money, so I'm just going to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And the other client might be feeling, well, I have to plan everything. I have to be thinking about the future and I can't enjoy money in this moment, because what happens if money runs out? What happens if I don't have enough?
Right. And I guess what I see a lot of times with my clients, and I don't know if you see this too, but like working a lot with the unconscious mind, is that those beliefs are not super apparent to people, even though when they're pointed out, it's kind of like that thing on the tip of your nose that you can't see yourself. So it's hard to get to the bottom of that on your own a lot of times, would you say?
I think so. I think the belief systems are formed, very early on. We know through a lot of research in financial psychology that often our relationship with money is formed by the age of 6. And there's
Yeah,
also a bunch of research that goes much deeper than that through epigenetics that
sure.
shows that we actually inherit 3 generations of money patterns,
Which is
which,
really difficult, at least, when I think about what people have gone through in the United States with the Great Depression and everything else. And, that's in those three generations for me, at least, and definitely inherited. And I notice a lot of that stuff where I don't feel like it was really mine. But then and I can definitely see it in my mom, who's a product of, her parents who went through that in the frugality and the saving everything and not wanting
yeah,
to throw away things because you
hoarding.
might need it, even though
Yeah.
she knows that she's abundant and that she has enough and everything else. So,
Yeah, and it makes sense as well, given the society that they were living in. For a lot of our grandparents, they were living post-war, where
mhm.
everything was about rationing. There
Yeah.
was a lack of food, so there was a lot of scarcity going around. I think nowadays we're exposed to different societal patterns and cultural beliefs.
Yeah.
But
What do
I
you see
think
currently? What kind of things do you pick up on in the world right now?
So much fear.
Yeah.
So much fear. I mean, even with what's going on just this week as we're recording this, with what's going on in Dubai and all of the war side, it's a huge amount of fear that is driving people's behaviors and a lot of manipulation around where people's attention should be going. And I think what fear creates is this big disparity between actually our true intentions and value systems and what we really desire from our hearts. Because, fear is often present when love is not. And so, yeah, I think we're living in a very fear-based society right now, whereas our ancestors, my grandparents, your grandparents' generation, were very much living in that kind of hope era. And that did create a lot of patterns where they were willing to share and repair with their connection with money. They're willing to, like upcycle the washing machine when it broke down rather than just putting it in the garbage and replacing it straight away, and helping their neighbors and being in that very community driven environment. Whereas now it's all about individualism, individual financial freedom. And we've lost that sense of collective consciousness and collective connection.
Yes. And I mean, that affects the workplace. I know I was speaking to another person who I was on their podcast earlier this week, and she works in the workplace, and she was talking about how, we've got 5 generations of people working right now. And there's so much difference in the way that, the values and the beliefs and everything else that it makes it quite a challenge to kind of bring it all together. And how like the new generation that's coming into the workplace now has kind of been in these silos, like you're talking about, like everything's very like individual, and especially with COVID and everything else. And so she was saying how like they get hired very quickly, they also get fired very quickly. So, that's going to have an impact on their money beliefs and everything else too. And, you one of the things that I've heard you say that stood out is kind of the way that we treat money often mirrors the way that we treat ourselves. And all of that comes through in those beliefs. Can you unpack that a little bit for listeners?
Yeah, it's the very first line in my book is that the relationship we have with ourselves is a mirror reflection of the relationship we have with money. So you can just take a moment to consider, if money were a person and you were to personify money in that way, and money was looking back at you in a mirror, how are you treating money?
Oh,
Are you
yeah.
treating money like the best friend, your paying attention on a regular basis. You're opening up your bank statements, you're looking at your investments, you're taking some interest in your personal finance?
Yeah.
Or is it more of a foe that actually you'd rather just pass that responsibility to your
Yeah.
partner or to somebody else?
I always like to say, if money were your lover, how would it feel about you?
Yes. And what I found really interesting when I first did this work for myself actually is what was really present for me was my ability to receive money. And I couldn't receive compliments. I couldn't receive help from other people. So when people would say, oh, your hair looks great today, I would
Right.
always receive the compliment and then very quickly turn it away. Oh, thank you
Sure.
so much. But actually, it's got, loads of split ends right now. And I need to go to the hairdressers. And I
Yeah.
wasn't able to really fully accept that because
Yeah.
by accepting that compliment, what I was actually really accepting was love and self-love,
Sure. That you are
self-worth.
enough, that you're awesome, that you're beautiful, that all those things that we love to just push back against with kind of the whole, oh, this old thing, you know, that kind of
Exactly.
resistance.
Yeah. And I would push money away in exactly the same way. I
And
wasn't.
what did that look like for you? Did that look like it would come in and you would spend it? Did that look like it just wouldn't come in, or you wouldn't do the things to pursue it? Or what did that pattern look like for you?
Yeah. So, working in financial services, I would make, pretty decent money at the bank, but I would spend it literally the day that it came in. And my ability to hold money
Yep, I've been there
meant,
too.
have you?
I've been there too.
Yeah. I think for me personally, when I look back at that time, really the biggest pattern for me was what did that mean? So what did it mean to hold on to money for
Yeah.
a few days or for a month or for a few months? And what was interesting for me is that what money meant for me growing up was money was always used as a tool to manipulate women, right? It was used in divorce conversations, in the if you don't do this, I'm going to stop the maintenance payments to you. It
Mhm.
was used as a weapon of conflict. And so when I was receiving money unconsciously, I wasn't necessarily aware of this, but seeing those conversations happening around me at a young age made me create this belief system that, well, if I hold on to money, then that makes me a bad person. And I don't want other people to think that I'm a bad person. So I'm not going to hold on to it. I'm going to give it all away. So I would make money really easily, but I would spend it even easier.
Yeah. And were you able to connect that to any particular like trauma or shame? Have you joined the Becoming More Me community over on School yet? It is one of the fastest growing distraction-free platforms for learning and connection. And it's where the magic's happening for the Becoming More Me community as well. Inside, you will find a high vibe circle of heart-centered, ambitious entrepreneurs and professionals doing deep work to become who they truly feel called to be in life, in business, in love, health, and wealth, and doing it in ways that feel aligned, authentic, and full of pleasure. The community is packed with tons of valuable resources too that you can start using right away, as well as guidance to find the ones that are going to help you so that you don't need to waste time. We're talking tools, training, and practices to support your growth, all for free. Plus, you can find info on working with me more deeply, whether it's through one-on-one coaching, small group experiences, or the Becoming More Me with EFT program, as well as information on upcoming workshops and other events. To join, head over to school.com/discovery. That's SKOOL.com/discovery. Type in my name, Teresa Lear Levine, and you will find the Becoming More Me community right there. Click on it to join. I can't wait to welcome you to the community.
Yeah, a whole bunch. A whole bunch, but a whole bunch for not just for me, but also for prior women in my family, there was a lot of
Mhm.
previous patterns down the female generational line. Like it was a really great exercise to do where I literally drew out my whole family tree and I started to look back through the family generations of the patterns around money specifically. This was something that I learned in a qualification that I trained in that was to do with epigenetics and how belief patterns can be passed through the body somatically. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting that both my mum and my mum's mum also experienced very specific examples where money or love was very quickly taken away from them. So my mum, she lost her father at a very young age. Her mum lost her husband at a very young age, and her son was killed in a car accident very quickly. So there were examples where money was involved and money was just literally whipped away from them as if the universe was going, you can't have it, you don't deserve it.
Mhm.
And so there was lots of trauma, inherited family trauma that was passed literally down through the family lineage. So it was really interesting to actually acknowledge that this wasn't just my shame that I was carrying, it was also the shame of multiple generations.
Yeah, I love the idea of looking at a family tree and kind of examining that on a closer level and seeing what has kind of arrived in that somatic way. What does
Mm.
somatic money work actually look like?
Yeah, well, I know that you are also an EFT practitioner, a
Do
master
somatic money work with my
practitioner.
clients? I'm just curious, like for you, like what does it look like? What's that path?
Yeah, there's a few different kind of somatic modalities that I really like. EFT is definitely one of those modalities, which I
Sure.
know we could totally geek out on. What I love about EFT is that it really helps us to be able to remove some of the energetic charge, through the meridian systems away from the body. And because somatic is body work. But what I really love, my most favorite modality, is actually more of the future-paced somatic tools. So I love the work of the Heart Math Institutes in the US. I think that they're continuously putting out more data and research into the power of the heart and how the heart has its own nervous system. It has over 40,000 neurons that are sending information directly from the hearts into our brains. And
Fascinating.
for me personally, I love centering myself in embodied heart breathing because for me, being able to use the EFT to like clear away some of the negative charge, but then re-imprinting through the heart a future where we can start to really bring in that kind of money visionary role and hold space for all parts of our identities that have formed around money through the heart, I think is just the most beautiful thing to do. And what that would typically look like if I was working with somebody would be to actually hold like a bit of a boardroom conversation in your mind and then bring it in through the body somatically. And in that boardroom conversation, there might be this one part of you that is wanting to build financial security and really excited about doing that. There might be another part of you that is more of the protector part that is holding shame or guilt around, how can I have more money when other people are suffering in the world?
Yeah.
There might be another part that's coming up that might feel angry about the financial backdrop that we are currently navigating in society right now. There can be many, many parts of us that are rooted in identity work with money.
Yeah.
And so I love like imagining and helping clients to visualize this either through journaling with different colored pens, through the mind, but also then bringing that into the somatic work of what are the emotions that we need to hold space for, not avoid and push them away, but hold space for so that we can then bring the power of the heart into that conversation and really open up the opportunities looking forward rather than just being in that healing work, because I do
Right.
believe that there is a lot of energetic shifts that we're also experiencing, even through the astrological shifts that we haven't seen in 6,000 years, where we're moving away from this healing into future focused, fast paced. Let's bring in the visionary into this rather than just feeling like we have to constantly be doing healing work all of the time, which can be
Yeah,
quite a dangerous pattern to stay in.
absolutely. I love that you're bringing attention to that. You mentioned using different colored pens for the journaling. Is a different color for each of the parts if you're doing kind of like that parts work with the boardroom of different
Yeah.
parts?
Yeah, so I've always got like the Legami pens like all around my house. They're really fun and come in different colors. And yeah, if I was journaling around this, I would identify maybe two or three of the main parts that are being most vocal in that moment around money. And then I would have 3 pages in a journal. And I would start the first page with the loudest part that wants to be heard. And right from that part, what does it want to share? What does it want to say? What's the message that it's trying to share with me? What is it trying to protect me from? And then I flip over the page and then I do a second page of the next part that wants to be heard. And then the third page is for you to like step into more of a observer perspective to then look at the first part and the second part from a place of love and compassion and notice, what are you observing about these two parts? How are they interacting together? Are they able to actually hold space for one another? And is there a middle ground that they can find together?
Absolutely. That's a great exercise. So if anybody's listening and you're realizing that you have a stressful or fearful relationship with money, I think that is definitely a step to take to start shifting that. That would be very actionable and results oriented. You've said that you would love to help 1 million women become financially resilient, and I love that goal. Why do you believe that increasing women's wealth actually changes the world?
Yeah, I mean, goodness, if you were to get like a room of perimenopausal women together right now, I feel like we could do a lot of significant change in the world right now. And
Absolutely.
we are in a generation where women are holding more wealth than they've ever held before. And it's really interesting when I have conversations about, wealth inequality and gender disparity and all of those kind of linked conversations, because women make better investors. We hold our investments longer, which means that we don't try and time the markets, which make us better investors. We get higher returns on our investments. But also, when women are creating businesses, we are generating more wealth for the economy than ever before. And I think that this isn't a subject that is spoken about enough, because the more women that can be supported to create businesses, generate more wealth in the world, learn how to pitch their ideas to investors, to get funding. We still only have less than 2% in the UK. We have less than 2% of female founders that are open and receiving investment in comparison to men. And I think it's a real shame, because there's such a big opportunity for female founders to impact the economy and the world in such a positive way. And
Absolutely.
I really believe that every single woman on the planet should be in a position where they are financially independent, not codependent on anybody else, irrelevant of whether you are in a very happy, harmonious relationship. I just believe this conversation is really, really vital right now.
Definitely. I totally share that dream and that goal, and all those reasons that you just gave are so incredibly important. I'd love to hear more
Mm.
about your book, It's Not About the Money, and how that supports women on this journey. Hey, quick pause to let you in on something you might not know. You can book a totally free, no pressure 15-minute insight call with me? Yep, just you and me, chatting about the real life stuff that's feeling heavy or unclear or stuck in your world right now. Whether that's in your business, your body, your relationships, your energy, all of the above, maybe. We'll explore what's really going on beneath the surface, and I will share a few personalized insights to help you start moving towards the outcomes you truly desire and get out of your own way with clarity, peace, momentum, and abundance. Just go to gamechangingconversation.com and grab a time that works for you. I can't wait to connect with you and hold space for your next breakthrough. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, thank you. So I published my book 4 years ago. I'm actually in the process of writing my second book at the moment. And the first book for me was about combining the practical side of building financial stability with money with this kind of emotional lens. I actually wrote the book way before as well. I was really introduced to a lot of the somatic work, which I think is going to be where my second book kind of comes in. But for me, it was about creating a book that layers around three main topic areas. The first being how we deserve money, the second about how we feel about holding money and power and wealth, and the third being about how do we create more of it so that we can use that to do good in the world. And that kind of framework was something that really supported me to be able to layer up the work between doing the practical side of creating stability and then also managing and navigating the beliefs and the emotions that come behind money as well.
Yeah. What was the book writing process like for you?
It wasn't too bad. I think I've been podcasting for 8 years, and so my mentor actually said to me a few years before I wrote the book, he was like, "You do know that all the episodes you've ever recorded on your podcast could just become the basis of your book." And I was like, "Ah, that's such a great idea." And for me, the thought of starting a book from scratch did create a lot of overwhelm. And so I actually, kind of from a practical perspective, I like downloaded all of the transcripts from all of my podcasts. This is
Mhm.
before we had AI.
Yep, I wrote my book in that time also. It was kind of like just coming into that, but I didn't use it. So I didn't know how to use it yet. And it's probably a better thing.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think now, like, I would probably throw those transcripts through AI and get it to like summarize some of the key
Right.
themes throughout it. But that was how I started it, and I threw these transcripts to an editor, and I said, "Look, can you help me to create the foundations of the structure of the book?" And once I did that, the rest of it was actually a nice journey, a nice process to go through. But I think that initial overwhelm of where do I start with this whole money
Oh yeah.
subject?
Yeah, I experienced that too. I know everybody's journey with book writing is different, so I'm always curious how it lands for other people. If somebody wanted to work on their money beliefs, their wealth, what kind of resources do you have, or would you direct them to?
Yeah, I think if you're interested in the somatic work, if maybe, if you've done some mindset work before, but there's still some deeper rooted beliefs that you're just finding hard to shift, then we've got a little mini somatic money course. It's $37, and it's called The Body of Wealth.
Mhm.
And so you can grab that on our website, themoneypanel.co.uk/body of wealth. And that's a really great place to start. It's 3 hours of really helping you to step into your money visionary and do that kind of boardroom conversation that we were chatting about earlier.
Yeah.
But I
Make
think,
sure that we have the link for that in the show notes for people too, if they want to check that out, because I think that's a great place to start.
yeah, thank you. I think from a money perspective, the question that we started this episode with around, if money were a person, how do you relate to money is a really beautiful place to start because it helps you to kind of personify money and imagine that money was a physical person, which obviously we know in reality it's not, but we the way that we experience money, the way we behave with money often is that we give so much of our power away to it. And so being able to personify it and start from that perspective can actually give you some really interesting insights.
Definitely. Definitely. And since you're on a show called Becoming More Me, I'd love to know, like, what has your journey with money taught you about becoming more yourself?
Mm, such a lovely question. I think what it's really taught me is that I am not money, and separating my sense of identity away from money has been the most empowering transformational decision I think I've ever made. And I think, particularly for me, because I've worked around money for so long, it became such a huge part of my identity because it was through my work. And I think a lot of people will be feeling this right now with AI, is that AI is actually forcing us to look at our identity in a completely different way. Because if AI can suddenly start to do aspects of our work where we've attached our careers to our identity, what does that mean for us? And I think being able to separate my identity away from money has really helped me to step into a place of joy and creativity in my work in a way that I was never able to do before. So yeah, I think that's how it supported me.
What kind of tools, and maybe there's some of the things that you already shared, and that's fine if they are, we don't need to talk about it again, but what kind of tools have been the most helpful for you about creating to help you create new identity?
I would say definitely EFT has been a huge part of that, and really listening to the thoughts that my body was holding on to. I also really enjoyed the work of Mark Woolin. So, Mark Woolin is the author of a book called It Didn't Start With You. And that dives into a lot of the inherited family trauma pieces that for me was really important, because I realized that actually a lot of the heaviness in my body that I was holding wasn't just mine. It was these patterns that we'd spoken about earlier. And that world of work, that body of work was really valuable for me. And it led me into a body of work called matrix reimprinting, which I don't know whether, are you familiar with that work,
I'm
Teresa?
familiar, but please tell the listeners what it's all about.
Yeah, so I trained in EFT with Cole Dawson, who was one of the EFT masters with Gary Craig.
Hmm.
And he went on to actually create his own modality called matrix reimprinting. And matrix reimprinting is a little different to EFT. It combines EFT, but what you're actually doing is that you're going back into very specific memories using EFT to tap on that younger version of you in that particular memory. And what the matrix reimprinting does is it gets you somatically and unconsciously shifting the actual beliefs that we made in that very moment.
Yes.
And for me, I went into probably 10 to 12 very specific traumatic situations as a child. And when I say trauma, they're not necessarily the big T traumas that people might be thinking about,
But
but
also
also
it doesn't matter,
exactly, yeah,
you know,
your nervous
because
system
if it's
is
going to show up and
responding.
it's going to affect you negatively one way or another, it doesn't matter whether it was horrific or whether it was just this everyday thing that you just didn't process as well as maybe somebody else would have processed the same thing.
Yeah, completely. I had a couple of very specific money memories actually that on the face of it were like, how that's not trauma, but my
Right. So
nervous
what?
system it's like, how is seeing my dad put his money jar into the back of a wardrobe and hide it away, how is that trauma?
Yeah.
But that trauma is the nervous system's response to danger. And for me that was like, money has to be kept secret, money can't be seen, we have to hide money away. And that whole experience created this whole belief system around money has to be kept secret for me. And I could see that playing out in my adult life. So being able to go back into that memory and being able to have a conversation with dad to ask him, why are you putting it in the back of your wardrobe? What was going on for him at that time that was connected to money? And then what was the belief that I made in that moment, and how did it connect into earlier belief systems? Because everything always goes, it's like an octopus. You kind of you take
Right.
one of the tentacles and you look at that tentacle, and then another tentacle kind of arrives, and then you can really get into the core belief work. And matrix reimprinting for me was a phenomenal modality to support me to be able to do that work.
Yes, I use that all the time too. I love that you brought it up and that you explained it so well because I don't think I've ever really broken it down on here as what it is, and it's so incredibly helpful. And
Okay.
it's amazing what all those little things that are going on subconsciously and in the nervous system are doing to our ability to like show up fully and most powerfully as our, abundant selves in the present moment. So, thank you
Mm.
for breaking that down. If people want to find you, connect, learn more about everything that you have to offer, where are the best places to do that?
Yeah, come hang out with me on my podcast. It's not about the money, or I have a YouTube channel, Catherine Morgan Money. Yeah, come hang out with me. I love just like chatting with our communities about what's going on for them. So yeah, come and hang out with me there.
I love that. Catherine, it's been such a fun episode, a really rich conversation. I really appreciate the way that you bring together practical money knowledge and combine that with the emotional and psychological side of financial well being. And if today's conversation resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out Catherine's podcast, her YouTube, going and checking out her Body of Wealth program. And that'll help you to dive deeper into money psychology, financial resilience, all of the patterns that shape our financial lives. And I think, I'll put all of that in the show notes also so that it'll be really easy for you to connect with Catherine there too. So, Catherine, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate everything that you shared.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to interviewing you on my podcast as well later. So yeah, I'll maybe share the link if your listeners want to hear more about your personal story as well. I know sometimes we spend a lot of time like interviewing other people. So
Yes,
yeah,
it'll be
I'm
a
really
full
excited
circle
to
thing, whether
dive.
you're listening to that one first or this one first. Go listen to the other one, and it'll kind of complete the conversation for you. And that'll be a lot of fun
Yeah.
too. I'm looking forward to that interview as well. And for all of you who are listening, I know you have literally millions of choices when it comes to the podcasts you tune into. So thank you for choosing Becoming More Me. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.